Hey gang, Pastor Hans here. Hope you're doing well. Today we are in chapter 8 of the book of John, and it's an interesting chapter because Jesus seems to be hinting for the first time that he's not going to be with the people for much longer. In fact, we hear it in a couple of spots. He seems to be preparing them. In chapter 8, verse 21, Jesus says, "I am going away, and you will look for me, and you will die in your sin. Where I go, you cannot come." You see, Jesus seems to be preparing them that he's not going to be with them much longer. He says in another spot, "If you hold my teaching, you are really my disciples, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." You see, Jesus is preparing them for a time when Jesus will no longer be with them. And throughout this chapter, what's interesting is in and amongst all of that preparing, he's got these challengers. He's got these Pharisees. He's got these religious muckety-mucks who, again, are challenging him again and again and again. And Jesus goes back to a central theme in the book of John, which is about light. Jesus says in chapter 8, verse 12, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." That even when he's gone, he can say confidently to them that they will live in light, whatever darkness they face. The same is true for you, and the same is true for me. The thing I want to focus on today, actually, is how this chapter begins and this chapter ends. This chapter begins with stones, and it ends with stones. It ends with a group of these religious leaders wanting to stone Jesus because they can't possibly fathom that Jesus is all he says he is. And so they're going to stone him. But here's what's interesting. The beginning of the chapter begins with another stoning story. You see, there was a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. And all of the men of the town, as Jesus approached that community, all the men in the town were standing around this woman. And each and every one of those men, they held a stone. And here's why. In that culture of that ancient world, the sort of penalty for adultery was that you could be stoned. So Jesus comes upon this scene where this woman is in the middle of this circle, all the men standing with stones, ready to stone her. And what's interesting is that Jesus isn't necessarily surprised. He isn't surprised about what this woman has done. And he isn't surprised that these men are about to do what they're about to do. But the story says that Jesus got down on the ground and he started to write in the sand. And it's really fascinating that the Bible doesn't say what Jesus was writing in the sand, but there are plenty of traditions that suggest that what Jesus was writing in the sand were the sins of all those men who were about to stone that woman. And the men kind of looked up and they saw what Jesus had been writing in the sand. And here's what it says. "But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger." In verse 7, it says, "When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them," listen to this, "If any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone." It's as if he said to them, you want to be angry? You want to make this right with this woman? Well, then any of you, if there's any of you that have not sinned, you go ahead and you throw the first stone. You see, in a sense, what he was saying to them is, come on, we've all sinned. We've all fallen short. Which of you hasn't lied? Which of you hasn't cheated? Which of you hasn't stolen? We've all fallen short. So the first of you who hasn't sinned, you go ahead and throw the stone. And of course, one by one, those men, they walk away. You see, again, in John chapter 8, where Jesus is painting a picture of who this God of ours is and who this God of ours came to shed light on. And man, he faces all kinds of challenges, all kinds of challengers and those religious muckety-mucks, the Pharisees, the religious elite. But what he's bound and determined to do is to remind those ancient people and remind people like you and me that Jesus came to be light in the midst of whatever darkness we face. So a couple of questions for you. First, from the perspective of the men who are about to stone this woman. What are the sorts of things that divide you from other people? What are the sorts of things, if you were to be really honest, when you look at certain groups of people who do a certain thing, what are the things when you look at them, you go, well, they just don't do it right. They aren't the right kind of people. What are the sorts of things that put you in the position of the men with the stone? And secondly, when do you feel condemned? When do you feel like you're in the middle of that circle and everyone's standing around ready to throw stones at you? Whatever that circumstance is, here's what I want you to hear. You have a God who looks at you and loves you, has open arms, who looks at you and says, I'm going to be your light. I'm going to shine a light on whatever you feel condemned for, and I want you to know that you are mine. Folks, thanks for tuning in to the Daily Dose today. That was chapter 8. Tomorrow, chapter 9. Take care.